Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Melissa Pineda, and today I will be discussing the book Hold On to Your Kids: Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. And this book is by Gabor Maté and Gordon Neufeld, originally published in 2004 and then re-released in 2013 to include additional chapters on how to raise your kids in a digital world. This book is excellent. I highly recommend it for all parents and for anyone planning to become a parent. This is one of those books that you like to revisit or should revisit as your kids age. So the first time I read this book was probably 7 years ago when I only had two girls. I didn't have a son. And now my son is 6, and I've just recently reread it and it just hit differently. Just truly excellent read, highly recommend it. And I'm going to dive right in and tell you why I do recommend this book. Before I get into a discussion on the book itself, I'm just going to really quickly tell you about the two authors. So Gordon Neufeld, PhD, he's Vancouver-based, and he is a clinical psychologist, internationally renowned as an authority on child development. And his counterpart, Gabor Maté, MD, is a physician and best-selling author. He's considered by many in the profession as an authority on stress, mind-body health, ADHD, parenting, and addictions. So this book explores the phenomenon of peer orientation and the idea of peers replacing adults and parents in the lives of our children. So a child essentially orients themselves based on who they identify with, who they look up to. And the authors are claiming that the child can only really be oriented towards either a loving adult, a parent, or another loving adult, family member, teacher, or their peers. It can't be both ways. And so they're saying that peers have now replaced parents in creating the core of our children's personalities. And this is a massive shift, even in comparison to a few generations ago, when parents mattered the most. So what is missing in peer relationships is unconditional love and acceptance. And that's only something that a loving adult can provide. Like peers, like our children's peers, are unable to, they're not mature enough, they're unable to provide the loving care and unconditional love that our children need. So there is no unconditional love and acceptance or a desire to nurture, willingness to sacrifice for the other, peer to peer. It just doesn't work that way. That only comes from a parent, a loving adult, to the child. And I mean, this is clearly disastrous for our kids. That's what the authors are saying. And they talk about suicide rates having increased dramatically in the United States, especially for the age group of 10 to 14-year-olds, and how they were treated by their peers mattered more for children than how they were treated by their parents. The authors discuss bullying, for instance, and the disastrous effects of that. But what they're focusing on is almost like the core of what was missing in order for a child that is being bullied to not take it to heart, like that's the wrong way of putting it, but basically the fact that they're so hard hit by this. Like obviously there is something lacking in that poor child, the lack of self-confidence, lack of like knowing that they're loved and accepted to begin with, for this bully, for this peer to step into this void and create such a disaster. The authors talk about some really cool facts about infants and children and things that are just nature, born with things, such as the stranger protest. So this is the idea that infants bond to adults and resist contact to those he or she is not attached to or does not know. And this is purely instinctual and totally natural. However, we have all witnessed parents chastising their kids for being rude, which was really the child just being shy. So peer orientation, the authors state, turns the natural instinctual response of stranger protest against the parent. So gestures of alienation include stone-faced looks, rolling of the eyes, refusal to hold hands, and this is not natural. This is learned behavior, and this is a direct result of your child being peer-oriented. So there is no adult attachment safety net, they claim, for many children nowadays. Our kids are growing up peer rich and adult poor, unfortunately. The authors claim that an attachment void has been created by the secularization of society. So, society used to support parents more, and that's no longer the case, they argue. So, the loss of the attachment community is as a result of this. So, even churches nowadays, they're saying, separate families according to age: kids with kids, teens with teens, adults with adults. They're saying that this goes against the idea of orienting your kids, having an adult orientation, where your kids are oriented toward you as the parent and the adult, as opposed to their peers. What's happening in society now is encouraging peer orientation. They also state that email and instant messenger have made the world more connected, of course, and works great, especially with respect to families that are separated by distance, or kids that are away at school communicating with their parents. However, they argue technology left in the hands of kids, well, they're only going to want to communicate with one another, and this will only promote peer attachment. They give examples, and they've interviewed many families for this book, and they give examples from real parents and families where the kid will come home from camp and just want to just jump on the phone or the computer and either call their friend, message them, and it's like this obsession, like it's a separate world, basically, is what they're saying. And the more the kids are around other kids, their peers, the more they want that. It's almost like an addiction. It's like the more they crave that. The authors claim that parents have lost the power to parent. And they talk about how the word power is negatively regarded in society nowadays. They discuss this word and how it has a negative connotation in today's world, and that there's often the idea of like abuse associated with this word. Like if you talk about the parent having power, it's somehow like forceful power. Somehow there's some sort of like hitting involved, or some type of physical aspect. But they're defining it differently. They're saying that the power for them, and what they're speaking of, is the spontaneous authority to parent. It does not flow through coercion or force, they claim, but through an appropriately aligned relationship between parent and child, and it arises naturally and without effort. So the more power a parent possesses, the less force is needed. The goal of this book, the authors claim, and a lot of the advice provided in this book, all go toward helping parents reassume their natural position of authority. And it's natural, it's desirable to have that particular position of authority. It's sort of like, we've all heard this, and we've seen this as parents, that kids don't know what's good for them. We know what's best for them as parents, and we know that they thrive in situations where there is structure and there are rules. Kids feel safe. They can't necessarily communicate that, but they feel safe when there are boundaries, that they have to observe. And so this kind of natural authority and power dynamic between parent and child is exactly like that same idea. So the authors claim that a patient and heartfelt understanding of attachment is the first step. We have to understand how and why things don't work and how they should work. So that's sort of how they go about this book. And a lot of the stuff that they say, like at first it sounds like despair, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is the situation. And maybe some parents reading this, it's all too relatable. But their whole goal is, they're going to be providing, and they do provide, like the steps of like what to do, how to fix the situation, how to prevent it in many cases if your children are younger, but how to address it if your kids are teens, for instance, or suffering from peer orientation. The authors talk about how parents are so concerned about their kids having friends, and they obviously, parents are concerned if their kids are accepted at school, accepted among their peers. But they're saying that this focus completely overlooks the importance of attachment. So if you are your kid's primary attachment, they won't be as vulnerable to peer attachment issues and abuse from their peers. So parent attachment is all they need and is vital to the child's well-being. So essentially, if you are the one that they attach to, they will have enough confidence and knowledge that they are loved, that they don't or won't be reliant on receiving that from someone else, from their peers. So being dismissed by their peers, for instance, it'll still hurt. I mean, it still hurts as adults when people, don't want to be our friend or dismiss us, but it's going to hurt less. That's what they're saying. They're going to be able to deal with it in that case if the child is parent-oriented and attached to you. So they talk about the hierarchical nature of attachment and that kids don't need friends. Like the natural order of attachment should be top down in terms of parent and child. Peer-to-peer, like that is not a natural order of attachment. It does not work. So kids need adults that assume the responsibility to hold on to them. The less peers matter, the more our kids can endure the vulnerability that comes with peer relationships. So that's like a huge point in this book too, and it addresses the bullying issue. It's just that they can endure the vulnerability that comes with peer relationships, that comes with dealing with bullies, that comes with dealing with friendships that fall apart when they're children, when they're young. So our kids can be vulnerable and know how to be vulnerable if they don't need friends, like if they don't need them. Like, yes, it's natural for kids to have friends and to play with other kids. That's not what they're talking about. Like these authors are talking about the fact that like they don't need it. Like if the kid is oriented toward the parent, attached to the parent, that is where they get what they need internally, and then they can navigate the rest of what like life throws at them in terms of their interactions with peers because of that kind of self-assurance and what they receive from their parent or loving adults. He speaks about that as well, so I'll get to that in a little bit. We have to give our kids loving acceptance to be themselves. This is something the authors claim that adults must do and something that immature peers are unable to provide them with. So the authors also say that attachment is sought in 6 different ways, and they kind of explain these ways, but also talk in this part of the book about how it's being sought, like the older kids are still looking for these ways to attach, but in a peer-oriented way, in a detrimental way to themselves. So that's how this next section kind of goes, and it's interesting. I'll list the 6 and kind of talk a little bit about what they are and then how the authors relate it to almost like it going wrong, essentially. So the first is proximity. So this is the first and most primary need. So it begins in infancy, and it's essentially like physical senses, being close, being touched, being in contact. Kids search for this. This is the way they attach to their mothers, their fathers. And however, like children looking for closeness, for instance, that are 12 or 13, that are peer-oriented, like sex is a ready-made instrument. Like it's a very effective with respect to proximity, like the attachment in this sense. And so they talk about like the increasing rates of children having sex like earlier in comparison to even a few generations ago. So another way that attachment is sought is sameness. So our children want to be like us. They want to be like us because the sameness creates like a closeness and an attachment. It reinforces security for them. They naturally look for ways to be like us and are flattered when people will comment on it too. Like, oh, you're just like your mom because, you do this, or you look just like your dad, things like that. And so this is where peer group values will be imitated. Like peer-oriented kids, you'll see them imitate peer group values. And this is the sameness element in the attachment that they're searching for. A third way that our kids search for attachment is through exclusive belonging and loyalty. So our kids want to feel like we have their back, like we're in their corner. And the more they feel this, the less likely they're going to look elsewhere for this. And the authors talk about how sexual interaction will be very enticing for kids that are peer-oriented, looking for this sense of exclusive belonging and loyalty. A fourth way that kids search for attachment is through being significant to someone else. So, feeling important, for instance, and for peer oriented kids, affirmation of status or attractiveness will become the prime objective. So, sex again is mentioned as being a useful tool of keeping score in this case. So, of feeling significant to someone, that's what these kids are looking for. And so the peer oriented ones will easily go and have sex to find that attachment. The fifth way that kids seek out attachment is through just love. This warm, comforting feeling that we get when we're being hugged or soothed by someone that we're attached to. And it's interesting, they talked about this study that was done with university students, and they were undergoing exams. So they had a huge amount of stress, they were doing their exams, and they had the mothers of these young adults text them and call them. It was one or the other. And so the ones that were texted, their stress levels, like they had measured the stress levels, and the stress levels didn't decline at all. Like just seeing the actual words, I love you, good luck, something like that, like it did nothing to alleviate their stress. However, hearing their mom's voice actually lowered stress levels. I thought that was pretty cool. So they talk about that, and and just that like feeling of being comforted by your mother's voice. And so that's another way that kids seek attachment. And then the sixth one is the desire to be truly seen and known. They want to be understood, whether it's by adults or by peers. The authors talk about how the objective has to be to collect your kids. I really like this term. They talk about collecting them. So to be with them, to connect with them. They talk about just getting in your kids' face in a non-aggressive way, getting in their face, their space. We usually only do this when we're scolding them, they say. But after any time of separation, especially, it's especially important to collect your kids. Whether you're on a business trip, you're away for the weekend, you're just gone, while they're at school, you're at work, look them in the eyes, smile at them, collect them. Same within the morning, not just, okay, good morning, let's go. Like, actually collect them, be with them, just even if it's for an instant, just look at them. They have to feel seen, essentially, is what they're saying. So also very important to collect your kids after any sort of argument. We have to restore and rebuild. It's always our responsibility as parents. It is not their responsibility as children to do this. Even, 12, 13, 14-year-old, they're still children. And so it's our responsibility as adults. And it's hard, right? It is so hard. To go back, like when you're mad. So don't go when you're mad. They're saying, like, don't go. Don't try to teach when you're angry either. It's an easy trap to fall into. You're kind of scolding and saying, and next time I don't want to see this, or don't do this. They're not going to hear it when they're upset, and you're not going to be a good teacher when you're upset. So you each have your breathing room, but then you need to rebuild and restore. They talk about how it's very important to invite contact with your child when they're not demanding it. Kids often demand our attention, and they're saying it's best to invite contact when they're not doing that, because it'll feel more genuine that way. When they demand it and you concede, their desire for attachment isn't actually met. Because they think you're just doing it because they requested it. And they're saying if it is at their request, it's still an opportunity to fulfill that feeling for attachment, that need for attachment, but just kind of like add something in. So take them by surprise and make them feel like it's your idea. Like, oh, you know what? I was thinking or trying to think of a way for us to spend some time together today. So great. That's such a great opportunity, a great idea. They kind of make it your own, essentially. They talk about transference of dependence. They talk about how parents are sometimes eager for their kids to grow up, eager for them to be able to do more things on their own and become more independent. But they're saying that the more you push your kid to be independent, the more they will resist and cling or go elsewhere. And I mean, it'll come, their independence will come, and it's important to foster that too. But they're talking about like pushing your kid basically before they're ready. We have to orient them. They say we do this well when they're toddlers. So we orient them. We're going to do this. And you kind of almost narrate your day, right? We're going to go do this today. And this is what's happening right now. And they say that we stop doing this when they're older, but they still need it. Act as their compass point, they say. This engages attachment. So you have to cultivate a connection with the child by orienting them. Essentially just, being the person in charge, which you are, but you're offering yourself as a guide. And he talks about how this goes, or they talk about how this goes for teachers and family friends as well. Kind of position yourself in there to be orienting. Okay, this is what's happening now. So when that happens, we're going to go and do this. Like, kids respond to that. Children need that. That encourages and fosters attachment. So some of you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, but what do I do if I have a peer-oriented kid, right? And they address this. So they claim that you have to reverse the conditions that led to the attachment void, because kids only become peer-oriented if there's a void in the attachment. So if there's an attachment void between your child and yourself, that's where the peer kind of gets in there. That's where the kid turns and searches for what they're not getting from you, and they're searching somewhere else. And this doesn't mean that, there's no judgment in this book. This doesn't mean you're a bad parent, you did a bad job. Not at all. It's just we do the best we can as parents. Like, we're all trying, and it's hard. The hardest thing any of us have ever done. So, don't despair if you're in that situation. This book is excellent in terms of offering solutions too. So I'll just talk a bit about this now, but it's worth, reading if you're interested, because they get, way more detailed. So essentially, you have to separate the kids from their friends and then place yourself in the void. So for instance, take your kids away for the summer. Take your child to, I don't know, if you can go to a cottage, if you can go somewhere else, if you can go visit a relative for a few months for summer vacation. You have to remove the child from that. And the authors talk about some families that they know, the parents have actually moved. Like, it was, however bad it was in that context for them, it was bad enough for them to actually move to another state or another province, another city, to switch the kids' schools, to remove that orientation, the pure orientation. And then you have to put yourself in the void, because there will be a void and your kids will be angry. And so the authors kind of talk about how you kind of navigate through that. So creating the void is, of course, only half the battle. You have to collect the child. That's the most important part. And things like they offer ideas. One idea is, a coffee date, get together, oh, let's go out for lunch, something like that, because you're going to have to figure it out. Like, if you create that void when you go away for the summer, for instance, but when you come back, if you don't move, when you come back, you have to face reality again. So now you've kind of collected, you've restored, you have a relationship with your child, but then you need to kind of fill that too. You need to cement it. So they're saying, plan things together, family sit down meals. I mean, as much as you can, at least once a week. That's a great way to connect and to collect. And so they emphasize the fact that it is always the parent's responsibility to keep the child close, to collect the child. I talked a little bit about this before, but the authors also talk a bit more about how you always have to take a breather before trying to teach or to discipline. You really have to just take a breath. Maybe now's not the right time, sort of thing. Come back to it later. They're gonna, you can take, half an hour and then say something, then sit down calmly and have that conversation with your child. Or even, sometimes mornings don't go well, drop off at school doesn't go well. After school, you reconnect, you collect the child, and then you might say something like, you're pretty upset with mom this morning, and then kind of go into it that way. Like, they're in a space to hear it at that point too. Not like the second you pick your kid up from school, but you know what I mean? give it some time first. So the authors talk about how like you always have to connect before you direct. So have that connection, smile first, connect, and then you teach, and then you direct, then you discipline. And discipline is not, getting them in trouble. Discipline is to disciple, right? To teach. The authors talk about shy children. They talk about how the best way to deal with a shy child is to promote warm relationships with the adults that love and care for them. And adult-oriented children will actually be shy around their peers, and this is okay because what will temper that is essentially a psychological maturity and a strong sense of self. So, like, the concern is not when the child is shy among their peers or other adults outside of their attachment circle. The concern is when there's a lack of shyness, especially peer to peer. So, all that that's telling you if your child is shy is that it's completely natural, and for other adults to for your kid to not be shy around other adults, it's on the other adults to foster attachment. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, and that's what needs to happen for your child to feel more comfortable around other adults in their lives. And with respect to them being comfortable with peers, like that, I mean, that will come. That's just not a concern, because what your child needs is something that peers are unable to provide them with. And that kind of goes into the next section about friendship and what your child needs. So true friendship, the authors say, is not possible until a certain level of maturity has been reached. This makes sense, of course. So many children are not capable of such friendships, like true friendships, the ones that support our growth, our development, regardless of how it affects the relationship. So true friendship is based on mutual respect and individuality, and this is just not something that children can provide for one another. So true friendship is not possible until a certain level of maturity has been reached. And many children, of course, are just not capable of such friendships, like true friendships where you support one another's development and growth. Friendships that are based on mutual respect, for instance, and individuality. The authors say that children need attachments and not friends. So not until true friendship is possible. And the only attachment a child needs is with family and those who share a responsibility for the child. And this is not another child. This is not a peer. So the authors say, give your child so much positive affirmation that they won't need to get it anywhere else. Let your kids know that they're celebrated just for being them, for their very existence. And the only way to get peers to matter less, they say, is for us to matter more. If you have friends, for instance, with similar values and morals, this is definitely a safe environment for your kids to have friends. So they say, like, some people think that, we're saying our kids shouldn't have friends, your kids shouldn't have friends. Like, of course not. And it's natural for your kids to have friends, for them to want to play with people their own age. They're just talking about the idea of preventing the peer orientation and attachment, because it is innate. It is natural for kids to attach. It's going to happen. It's just whether or not they're going to attach to you or other loving adults or to their peers. Chapter 17, I usually don't list the chapters, but I wanted to specifically throw it out there in case there are any parents of just one child out there that are listening to this and that are interested in the book, because the whole chapter, like, they do discuss people with one kid, and it's interesting. I myself have 3, but this chapter I found very interesting because they say that peers are no substitute for siblings. So siblings share the same working compass point, for instance, and like those relationships exist alongside the relationship between the child and the parent. So their relationships with their siblings, it's all kind of part of the same puzzle. It's just all part of the same thing. So they're saying that parents of one child often try to overcompensate and constantly arrange play dates. And like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about arranging play dates and kind of filling the void of the fact that your child doesn't have siblings. Like, it doesn't work that way. And You just have to be concerned about the attachment, not the fact that, oh, my kid needs peers because they don't have siblings. Like, they're saying that's not the case. They're saying that, like, one answer, for instance, can be like cousins, really foster those relationships, or cultivate family friendships. If you have friends that have the same values, perfect, something like that, where those are completely like safe attachments, even like peer-to-peer in that sense, because it's kind of facilitated or overseen by the family. It's a family relationship. It's not like they're having a play date and you have no part in it, sort of thing. And basically they're talking about how, like, the problem is not kids playing together, but kids left to one another when their attachment needs have not been met by the adults in charge. So this is when our kids are most at risk of forming attachments that compete with us, the parents. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion on Hold On to Your Kids. If you found it interesting, please pick yourself up a copy. You won't regret it. I highly recommend it. I myself have found it really helpful in terms of parenting, and I hope you do too. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. Subscribe, and until next time, thanks for listening.